We are almost at the end of the church liturgical calendar. You know that the church year is different from the normal year. We start the church year not on January the 1st, but with the first Sunday of Advent. Next Sunday, we celebrate the feast of Christ the King. And then the following Sunday, we start the new church year. We call it the liturgical year, with the important season of Advent. In today's Gospel reading, we proclaimed, because we do not read the Gospel, but we proclaim the Gospel, because this is the good news, the Evangelion, the good news. So we proclaim it, we shout it from the pulpit, from this place, sacred place. We proclaimed this Sunday this beautiful parable called the parable of the talents, taken from the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 25. Today, the word talent means a particular ability, a special gift you have, like for example in sports or in art, dancing, drawing, singing, some ability that you have that and others don't have. But in ancient times, the word talent meant a completely different thing. A talent in ancient times, therefore during Jesus' time, was an unit for measuring value. The Hebrew term for talent was kikar, and it referred to a flat, round disc made of silver or of gold. Now, in very ancient times, before Jesus, units of measurement were based on practical standards. For example, the length of an arm equaled 1 day's journey. 1 day's journey, the length of an arm. Now, this type of system could never be a standard one. Why? Because one person's arm, for example, can be longer or can be shorter than another. So people needed more precise standards for weights and measurements. And they created the talent. The talent, as a unit of measurement, is first mentioned in the Old Testament, in the book of Exodus. And it was the heaviest or largest unit of measurement for weight. And it equaled to about 75 pounds. In the New Testament then, we notice that the word talent changed its meaning from a unit of measurement for weight. It became a unit of measurement for money, for currency. In fact, for example, during Jesus' time, a talent represented a rather large amount of money. During Jesus' time, a talent was equivalent to 20 years of salary, to 20 years of wages for a common worker. Therefore, someone who possessed 5 talents of gold or silver, as we saw in today's gospel reading, was a multimillionaire by today's standards. This parable we have just proclaimed tells of this master who was leaving his house to travel. And before leaving, he entrusted his wealth, his talents, to his servants. Now, during Jesus' time, this was not a strange thing to do. That means, while Jesus was telling these things, people could understand immediately what he was talking about. Why? Because during Jesus' time, some servants or slaves, especially in the very wealthy households, enjoyed a considerable responsibility and authority. some of these slaves were entrusted with great responsibilities. And in this parable, the money taking the journey turned over a huge amount of money, 8 talents, a huge amount of money, to 3 of his servants, who understood that they could share the profits if they managed well the money they had received. When the master returned, he found that 2 of these servants had invested his money wisely and actually doubled their investments. However, the 3rd servant told him, "Master, I'm afraid of you. Therefore, I buried my talent because I did not want to risk what I had in my hands." In other words, he didn't do anything because he was scared of his own master. He was full of excuses, trying to justify, trying to explain himself to his master, who was certainly not happy. The master told him, "Couldn't you have at least put my money in a savings account so it could draw some interest?" And the employer, the master, was so frustrated that he took away the money he had given to that servant and gave it to the first servant who had been faithful. It is interesting that all these 3 servants had the same opportunity, but the servant full of excuses did not take advantage of it. God works the same way. He has entrusted every person with a measure of gifts, of abilities, of resources. We all here, this church this morning, we all have been given something different, something special, something important. And God is watching to see what we will do with it. Jesus is telling us this morning, if you are faithful with what God has given you, He will multiply, He will increase what you already have in your hands. And here we are not talking about money. Here we are not talking about wealth. Here we are talking about inner peace. Here we are talking about true and real joy. Here we are talking about making better our relationships with others, with those at home, with those at work, with those at school. Because it is not about how much you have. It is about using well what you have. I believe Jesus is telling us this morning, don't be afraid and bury what you have been given. Instead of comparing ourselves with others, we need to recognize that God has given each of us exactly what we need to fulfill exactly what He has for us. It may not look like what the person has next to you, but that's why we all need to stay focused on what God has given us. Let us ask this morning ourselves, what is in our own hands? How are we using it? How are we using our wealth? How are we using our time? How are we using all the beautiful gifts God is giving us every single day? Don't allow excuses to cause you to bury what you have been given. It's telling me, Jesus, this morning, make the decision to wake up every day with a good attitude, with an attitude of faith, with an attitude of expectancy, and look for ways to use what God has placed in your hands for His glory and for the good of others, and also, why not, for the good of our own selves. I believe Jesus is telling us this morning, believe in yourself. And once you start believing in yourself, you will believe also that God is working on your behalf. It may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen next week. But Jesus is telling us all this morning, stay faithful, because God will multiply you in ways you cannot even imagine. Step out of your comfort zone, as the first two servants did. Be faithful with what you have already in your hand today, this morning. And remember that God has you in the palm of his hand, because you are created on purpose, for a purpose, and you have what you need to be a better man. You have what you need to be a better woman. You have what you need to be a better Christian and Catholic in every area of your life. Amen.